light has got to be the most versatile tool for photographers. It is the most powerful tool for photographers. And once you know how to use it properly to achieve the image you want, look out, world. I mean, that is what it's about. You are recording light. So when you know how to use light, when you know how to see light, and you can capture it the way that you see it, the way that you want it to be in your image, there's nothing holding you back. Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, your all-in-one solution for photographers of all skill levels to deliver and sell your photos online. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we are continuing our 10-part Photography Manifesto series. And today, we are halfway through it. Now, if you haven't heard the Photography Manifesto overview episode, be sure to check out episode 334, where I go over what is the Photography Manifesto. I go over a brief overview of all of the manifesto rules and give you a little bit of an overview into what each one is. Now, each month, I go through a little bit deeper into each manifesto rule and how you can apply it to become a better photographer. Now, this Photography Manifesto was created with more than 10 years of professional photography experience, and also with some of the most important takeaways that I picked up from interviewing more than 300 world-class photographers here on the Beginner Photography Podcast. So why don't we go ahead and dive into what really matters in photography with Photography Manifesto Rule number 6. Photography Manifesto Rule number 1 is that the point of photography is to enrich the human experience. Photography Manifesto Rule number 2 is to be a halfway decent photographer, you must dedicate all of your time to it. Photography Manifesto Rule number 3 is moment matters most in a photograph, not camera settings. Photography Manifesto Rule number 4 is you don't need to know everything in photography to know anything in photography. Photography Manifesto Rule number 5 is your camera's not holding you back, you are holding yourself back. And today, we're going to break down Photography Manifesto Rule number 6. If there's no intention, there is no image. I want to ask you a question, and this may be a crazy question, but what is a photograph? What makes an image stand out to you? What's the difference between a photo that you took at the store, right, to send your spouse? Do you want this one or do you want this one? And a photo of your child laughing. What is the difference between shooting in auto and shooting in manual mode? The answer is intention. And without it, a photo is simply a snapshot. Manifesto Rule number 1, the point of photography is to enrich the human experience. Does that happen on accident? Can you do that? Can you enrich the human experience on accident? Manifesto Rule number 2, to be a halfway decent photographer, you must dedicate all of your available time to it. You don't let photography just happen to you. It's a give and take. You have to put in time to it. You have to dedicate time to it. You're busy. You have to intentionally choose to dedicate time to it. Manifesto Rule number 3, moment matters most. Well, who decides what the right moment is? Manifesto Rule number 4, you don't need to know everything in photography to know anything about photography. So how do you know what you need to know? Manifesto Rule number 5, your camera gear is not holding you back. You are holding yourself back. Yeah, the best camera is the one that you have with you. So how do you use it? The thing tying all of these rules together is intention. You have to intentionally do your part to enrich the human experience. You have to use your time intentionally when practicing. You have to be intentional about what moment matters most. You have to be intentional about what you learn in photography to avoid overwhelm. You have to be intentional with how you use your gear, no matter what gear you have. So again, what separates a snapshot from a photograph? Intention. Now, I take snapshots all the time. They are just fine for, many things. But when I'm trying to communicate something in an image, when I'm trying to communicate an emotion, when I'm trying to communicate a special moment or something interesting, you need to get intentional. Imagine for a moment a photo of somebody crying. Think about it in your head. Somebody's crying. Is that person crying in the photo that you see in your head? Are they taking up the entire frame? Or are they off in a corner? Unnoticeable. Maybe in a public place, dozens of people walking around them. Same person, same place, same moment, two different photographs. You have to be intentional about how you communicate with your images. And honestly, whether you're focusing on the person in their emotional state very close up to make the viewer feel uncomfortable, or you are getting wider to include more of what's going on around them to show that, sometimes people suffer in silence. They are both the right answer. They are both perfectly valid photos for you to take, but you have to decide, be intentional, what the photo you want to capture is about so that you can shoot it. Intention is what elevates a snapshot into a great shot. Now, intention does not have to mean that you know everything about photography so that you can make the perfect decision every time. In fact, just because a photo is shot with intention does not mean that it is inherently good. But visually, you can see the effort that the photographer put into the image, which makes it more compelling. There are 3 ways to be intentional with photography that we're going to break down today. And I'm actually going to share an exercise with you so that you can practice being more intentional with your images as well. So the 3 ways that you can be intentional with photography is intentionality in composition, intentionality in lighting, and intentionality in moment. Let's start with intentionality in composition. So simply put, composition is how you compose your shot. In photography, it is you who is in charge of what is in your frame. And ultimately, if a photo fails, if it falls flat, you're the photographer and the buck stops with you. I don't know where that phrase came from. I should look that up before I just continue to say stuff like that. But every choice that you make on what to include and what not to include affects your image. The lens that you use dramatically changes your composition. If you're shooting a baseball game and you want a close-up of a player, you're not going to use a wide-angle lens. Your distance to your subject dramatically changes your composition. Stepping closer to your subject creates a different feel than just zooming in, or worse, cropping in. Now, side note, I'm not against cropping, but stepping in and zooming in are intentional. Cropping in is typically just to fix something. So, you fix a level horizon, fix the fact that you were too far away and that you should have got closer, So nothing against cropping, but we're going to call it for what it is. A 35mm lens creates a different relationship with your subject and your viewer than if you were to use a 135mm lens. So much more than just how big your subject is in the frame. Now, when I was shooting weddings, when I would shoot a first look, I would always use a 70-200 because I wanted to give the couple space. I changed their relationship with me because of my lens choice. If I used a 35mm lens and I was close to them, how weird would that feel for them? A warm embrace, some tears, and a stranger snapping photos right in front of your face. You can hear the shutter slap. Right as you're taking photos. Come on. Or right as you're, embracing. Pass. I do not want that. Because that's not the image. That's not the story that I wanted to tell. Being further back let me be more honest with an image. Because it let them open up to each other. It let them have a few more tears. It let them have a laugh or two. And that's what it's all about. And as the photographer, I would just simply choose a space for them to do their first look that would lend itself to shooting with a longer lens because, like I said, composition is not just what you intentionally include in the frame, but it's also intentionally what you decide not to include in the frame. So when you use a long lens, it is much easier to hide things because your field of view is just much smaller. You don't have to make as many adjustments. But when you use a wide lens and include more of the environment, it is much more difficult to hide things. And I'm not just talking about trash cans or people walking or just the obvious stuff, but maybe your subjects are walking down a path and you don't want to include too much of the greenery, right? On either side. You want kind of the strong leading lines of that path to draw the viewer's eye right towards your subject. Or maybe you are in an urban setting and you found a small patch of trees that when you use it just right, you use the right lens, you're just close enough that those trees are able to block out the tall buildings and the urban setting around you, transporting your subject into the depths of the forest, a million miles away from civilization. That's composition. That's being intentional. You're making intentional decisions to produce the photo that you see in your head. Or maybe you do want to show more. Sometimes the environment is a character in your photo. Maybe you want to show that juxtaposition between this beautiful, tiny forest in this sea of skyscrapers. That was a hard sentence to say. Maybe you just want to show that couple on a park bench chatting after a long bike ride in front of a couple taking their wedding portraits. Maybe you just want to see more sky. I don't know. I don't know what you want. You do. I cannot tell you how to shoot. You tell you how to shoot. You have to listen to yourself. That's how you become intentional. So much more so than just using the rule of thirds or leading lines or framing. Those are all incredibly powerful compositional tools, but they're also talked about, all the time. And those things aren't going to transform a bad photo into a good photo. In fact, here's an exercise for you to practice and see just how big of a difference your composition can make in your images. The next time you go out and shoot, every time you take a photo, once you snap that shutter, I want you to immediately, like a genie, right? Somebody pops up and says, oh, now you have to take one step closer and take another photo. Just do it like 10 or 15 times, right? You take a photo. Oh, let me take one step closer, take the same photo. Even if now you're too close or you think like, something is wrong here, just take the photo anyway. 10 or 15 times, because when you look at those photos on your computer afterwards, you're going to see just how much more alive your image is, how much more your subject stands out. And honestly, maybe it's not the right choice for you. Again, I don't know. You have to make those decisions, but you have to take those photos in order to make those decisions. I want to give you the tools, and then I want you to decide when you're going to use those tools and how you're going to use those tools with intention. Next, we have intentionality in lighting. We had intentionality in composition. Now it's intentionality in lighting. I don't need to tell you how important light is to capturing a photo. If you're unaware, a camera's only job is to allow light into the lens to capture it. And if you want to see how powerful of a tool light is, just go ahead and take a photo of somebody in a pitch black room and then turn on the lights and then take that same photo again. And then you tell me which one is a better photo. Your job as the photographer is to tell the camera what light you want to capture and how to capture it. You use your composition to tell your camera what light you want to capture. You have to be pointing in a certain direction to see the light, right? And then you use your camera settings to tell your camera how you're going to capture it. And I'm not just talking to photographers who use flash or artificial light. In fact, all you self-proclaimed natural light shooters out there have a much harder job of being intentional with light. So listen up. The way that light is used is so much more important than how much light or what kind of light is used. Light has got to be the most versatile tool for photographers. It is the most powerful tool for photographers. And once you know how to use it properly to achieve the image you want, look out, world. That is what it's about. You are recording light. So when you know how to use light, when you know how to see light, and you can capture it the way that you see it, the way that you want it to be in your image, there's nothing holding you back. Light can be used to create mood within an image. Before I walked on to my first film set that I ever worked on, before I went to film school, I would watch movies and notice, wow, this scene is dimly lit, Why isn't there more lights? Maybe a man is sitting in a chair next to a window, and all you can see is just a sliver of the left side of his face. Or a chase scene. Two people are running down a dimly lit hallway. Or a man, road to perdition, a man who is in the light of a street lamp at night in pouring down rain. And I remember asking myself, why are these so dark? I can't see the actors' faces as they're running. Does the cinematographer have no idea what they're doing? Why would they not use more lights? Come to find out, they knew exactly what they were doing. And what they were doing was creating mood. A man sitting in a dark room where you can only see a small portion of his face, he knows something that he shouldn't. What is it? Running down a dark hallway? Well, that offers many places to hide. A man standing in the rain under a street lamp on a moonless night is about to do something drastic. But what? If all these scenes were just flooded with light, they would not be as mysterious. They would not be as compelling. They would not draw you in the same way. That's mood. That is mood. What do you want your viewers to feel? How can you use light to make them feel that way? Light can be used to create depth. It can be used to create dimension in your images. Maybe your subject is standing in this pool of overhead light while the world around them is dark. Maybe the sun is coming through the trees, backlighting your subject. Maybe you're using light coming from the side rather than hitting your subject straight on. These all create the same effect. They make your subject stand out against their background. We are only able to see depth because we have two eyes. Your camera only has one. So we have to use our tools to create a sense of depth to look more like what we see with our own human eyes. Why do people want to shoot at f1.8? Well, because it blurs out the background. Why do you want to do that? Well, to make your subject stand out. How does a blurry background make your subject stand out? By creating depth between them and the background. Well, guess what? You can do the exact same thing with light. It's just not as simple as turning a dial. But it is as simple as being intentional about where you place your subject and where your light is coming from. Again, there is no, you must do this, you can't do that. All you need to do is step 1, then step 2, then step 3, and you've got a great photo. A great photo comes from within. It comes from your own choices, your vision, your knowledge of the tools that you have available, and the choices that you make to control the light. Intention. A great photo comes from intention. Time of day is a way to be intentional with light. Why is golden hour, that hour before the sun sets, such a beautiful time to shoot? Because the light is different. Because the light is different, it changes the mood of an image compared to the same photo taken at 2 p.m. It feels warmer. It feels happier. It feels more carefree. And it feels young and fresh. Why? Because the sun is lower in the horizon. The time of day changed the direction of light to be lower rather than overhead. So choosing to shoot at golden hour is intentional. The hour after sunset is called blue hour. It's much more cooler than golden hour, as you can imagine. But even though the light may not have the same directional quality, it can produce some of the softest natural light you've ever seen. And it can create some of the most even exposures throughout a scene. Right? Where the exposure on your subject is the same as the exposure in the background, creating just this even exposure that is near impossible to do many other times of the day. So again, what do you want your photo to say? How can you be intentional with light? You have to know the tools. You have to know what they do. You have to know how they work. You have to know how they make you feel. And guess what? I can't tell you that. But you know who can? You can. When you actually shoot, when you get out and shoot, when you try these things, you're going to see things in a way that makes you say, oh, I like that. Or, no, not a big fan of that. Which will then give you more information to be more intentional with how you use these tools. And lastly, we have intention in moment. It's moment that matters most. And that's why I saved the best for last. It's moment that is also one of the hardest to talk about. Because moment is everything. Moment determines everything in a photo. From what time of day you shoot to how your subject's smile has a twinge more of a smirk from one frame to the next. Moment is knowing this is a good shot, but I know it'll be better with a car passing in the frame. Moment is choosing a slower shutter speed to see the car streak across the frame rather than a faster shutter speed, making the car look frozen and like it's just parked in the middle of the road. Moment is playing music that lightens the mood so that your subject just feels more comfortable. In fact, there's on the opposite end of that spectrum, there's a director of a well-known horror movie that may or may not rhyme with The Rexorcist, who would surprise and frighten everyone on set when they would just randomly shoot a gun right before a scene, just so that everybody would feel more tense and on edge. While I do not condone that particular method, it sure did create a mood that they were going for. They changed the moment. And again, I'm not saying that you should go to extremes to manufacture how people feel. There is a beauty in the organic. There's a beauty in those happy accidents. But I do want you to be aware of how your choices can change the image. Choices that you make off camera, not just with your camera settings or with the light. In fact, one time I showed up to an engagement session and I called the couple by the wrong names right away. And to the fact where I was so sure that it was their names that I was like, oh, then this couple isn't the couple that I'm here to shoot. When I found out that it was because they had a friend come with who I had shot her engagement session, I realized, oh, this is them. And I definitely called them by the wrong name. Do you think that they were, that they felt open and that they felt excited for their session? No, they did not. I unintentionally changed the mood, which changed every subsequent moment that they were in front of my camera. Moment isn't just the right smile or the right photo before a big catch. That's more like timing, and timing is important. But moment is kind of it's the culmination of composition. It's the culmination of light, the culmination of camera settings and timing coming together in one image. So you capture a moment in every single image, but whether it's the right one, that changes. Photography it's both the easiest and the hardest thing in the world. Can you press a button? Oh, you can? All right. Well, now you can call yourself a photographer. Oh, but can you create images that have meaning? Can you create images that make people think? Can you create images that enrich the human experience? Those images take time. After you learn to shoot in manual, and you get comfortable with it, you're no longer taking those giant steps in your photography. At that point, you strive just to be 1% better. You go from, seeing light, like, whoa, okay, I get it, to using it directionally. Oh, sweet. To learning how to make it softer. Nice. To then perfecting its color. The progress gets smaller and smaller, but it's your images that get better and better. And intention is the only way to get there. And sometimes we subconsciously make intentional choices. And I know that you're thinking, oh, that's about as much of an oxymoron as there could be. But I didn't realize for a long time how I would always place my subjects in the bottom right intersection of the rule of thirds until another photographer pointed it out to me. Now, when I was shooting, I intentionally made that choice to place my subjects there. But it wasn't until they said that all of my, tiny people, big environment shots, that all the people were in the bottom right, that I became aware of it. And what that did is that gave me information to then make the decision to either lean into it or, lean into it and make it my own, or switch it up and get more variety of shots. And that's why I love chatting with photographers. I love seeing their photos, and I love hearing how they see the world. I love hearing their thoughts on the works of others. I love all of it. It really is important to have people that you can call on to get their input so that you can be more intentional with your photos. While I think that you can create work that you're happy with without having any outside influence, I really think that having people that you trust surrounding you makes that process so much faster and so much more enjoyable because it's not as lonely. Photography can be lonely sometimes. I want to take a moment to think about a musical composer. When we think of a musical composer, they are the person who stands in front of the band, big orchestra, and with a flick of their wand, the band does exactly what the composer wants them to do. The musical composer, however, did not just step up to the podium in front of this band for the first time. They've been working together for weeks or months. It's up to the composer to decide if they want a clarinet or a flute, if they want a tuba or a saxophone, or if they want cymbals or a cowbell. Once they make the decision, they get everybody together to start playing. Now, most of the time, they work together. But sometimes, the clarinet's job is to play super high. Sometimes the sax gets a sweet solo, and inevitably, there's always a need for more cowbell. But then on the day of, it's up to the composer to control the timing, the tempo, the rhythm of the band. And that can change depending on their mood for the day. Maybe they perform one show after they just had a really nice conversation with a friend who they just reconnected with after many years apart. So for that show, they compose more fluidly. The highs aren't as high. The lows come up a bit. It's more of a journey. And then for that next show, they had just found out that maybe their landlord is kicking them out in 2 weeks for all the complaints from all their neighbors about all the excessive cowbell at all hours of the night. And on this evening, that composer has quite an axe to grind. So the tempo sped up. There's some fire in their fingers. It just comes out of that wand when they produce an explosive sound that demands incredible precision. 2 different yet wonderful performances composed with intention that also allowed to be open to outside influence and understanding that while you can control all that you can control, you can't control everything. And you have to be open to surprises. Photography is like a symphony. There are many players that you have to consider, organize, and control to get a great shot. A photo with intention stands out as being visually unique. A snapshot never stands out unless the subject itself is extraordinary. Like a green giraffe. I don't know. Nobody's looking at the visual qualities of an image when you snap a photo of a forest giraffe. They don't care. The subject itself is extraordinary. With intention, though, you can transform the things that you find beauty in, even if they're not traditionally beautiful, and you can transform them into a visual language that others can also find beauty in. Like many kids, mine like to watch SpongeBob, and there's a running joke that SpongeBob's neighbor, if you've never seen the show, his name is Squidward, he is terrible at playing the clarinet. I mean, when he does, it sounds like a mix between like a screaming cat and nails on the chalkboard at the same time. I mean, real bad. But before, SpongeBob, I had never thought to myself, what sounds terrible? Clarinets. I've only heard clarinets in arrangements with other musicians, and they all need to work together. Your lens isn't going to make a great photo. Your flash isn't going to be what makes your photo great. And the moment isn't going to be what makes your photo great either. They can all make your photo good, but it's only when combined and working together in a harmony that your photo is great. You have to be intentional. You have to be intentional to know what lens is the right choice. You have to be intentional to know how you're going to use your flash. You have to be intentional to know what moment you want to capture most. And it's only then that you can create a great photo. The best part about intention is that it doesn't care what camera you have. There's nothing for you to buy now to take better photos. There's no need to rush to the phone and place your order today. There's nothing like that. You just pick up your camera and you start shooting. Because as you know, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.